Now, some people probably aren't going to like the things that I just said, and I don't blame them. That's how we're structured, to like and dislike things. And one can have a very passionate reaction to the idea that this person that we don't like has meaning in the eyes of the divine mystery and is loved equally as we are loved. You know, the new atheists don't want to even believe there is a God, so they don't care about that. The creationists think they've got the total hit on what God wants. God's going to come back in the second coming, and he's going to kill all the unbelievers. You know, and of course that's a common idea everybody shares with, lots of other people. Anyway, of this book, to sort of kind of cool things down, I'm going to read some things from Steiner's book that he wrote at age 25. Now remember earlier I said, quoted Emerson saying, "Nature is a thought incarnate and turns to thought again as ice becomes water and then gas. The world is mind precipitated, and the volatile essence is forever escaping into the state of free thought." Now, Emerson said that at age 33 in 1836, and when he wrote an essay called Nature. 50 years later, in 1886, Rudolf Steiner wrote that book I just showed you. He was 25. Here are some of the things that he said in this book, which of course it talks about thinking and knowledge and all the rest of that, somewhat using the language that was common at that time in the field of epistemology. Here's one of the things he said. "The world is not merely known to us as it appears, but it appears as it is, although only to thinking contemplation. The form of reality in which man delineates in his knowledge is its final true form." Now what's he saying? He's saying that when we think and actually grasp the idea of reality, which is what we've been talking about when we've been talking about the concepts that are the structure of the world and the participation through love and wisdom of the Creator in that in our individual biographies. When we think that idea, we are experiencing the true form of the world. Now, how can we do that? What is it there about us that lets us do that? Well, let's go to another place in this book. This is in the chapter on human freedom. Oops, I passed my book. Wait a minute. Okay. Sorry about that. This is the chapter, is the introduction to spirit and nature. Remember, we're talking about introducing qualities, which is what we've been doing in these discussions, introducing qualities and trying to see the qualitative nature of the world organism. It is really the genuine and indeed the truest form of nature which comes to manifestation in the human mind. Whereas for a mere sense being, only nature's external aspect would exist. Remember, we talked about our sort of domination today by the senses, but the fact is we're also thinkers. Knowledge plays here a role of world significance. It is the conclusion of the work of creation. What takes place in human consciousness is the interpretation of nature to itself. Thought is the last member in a series of processes whereby nature is formed. In the immortal spirit, as a thinking being, when we form cognitions, wow, what did I make? What's happened is that the Creator itself has divided itself into a multiplicities of free, completely individualistic, human, immortal spirits. And they now stand in the world able to think about it. But thinking in this sense is a perception of the spirit. Rudolf Steiner wanted his book called in German Der Philosophie die Freiheit, the philosophy of freedom. For English speakers, he wanted it called the philosophy of spiritual activity. Thinking or cognition is an apprehension or perception of the fundamental spiritual reality of the world, because in the idea is the spirit of what we observe through the senses. Remember, I just read that part. Okay. Now, in all of this, of course, we got to the point the last time, this problem of morality. And, of course, that's in the chapter on human freedom. You'll find it in my writings that discussed moral grace. You'll find it where I write about the second Eucharist and the ethereal, which is a communion between us and the Divine Spirit in the form of an experience where when we try to form a moral idea out of our freedom. And of course, there's a lot of people that wouldn't want people to have moral freedom. They want to tell you what to be moral is, but if you look at the world, that's everywhere in conflict. When we try to form an idea out of moral freedom, man does not receive laws from an external power. He is his own lawgiver. For in him the guiding power of the world manifests himself. He does not live his will somewhere outside of man. He has renounced his own will in order that all might depend upon the will of man. If man is to be enabled to become his own lawgiver, all thought about world determinations outside of man must be abandoned. And of course, this is one of the great conflicts and conceptions that exists today. Institutional religions, in a kind of paternalistic sense, want to tell people what is right. People in themselves, because the Spirit is being born more and more in them, their Buddha nature and their Christ impulse is being more and more born in them, within them, want to manifest their own sense of what is morally right. Now, if you want to see a dramatization of this in American culture, then rent 2 movies of Clint Eastwood, $1 Million Baby, and the other one, Gran, Torino. In both movies, you will see a conversation between an older man and a priest. There's distinctions between the two conversations which are important. But in any event, the struggle for the human being in those dramas, which Clint sees as an artist, he doesn't have to have the conceptions I'm giving you, but he sees us as an artist, as an aspect of the human condition. The priest is not able to satisfy what lives in this human being who wants to make moral choices that satisfy his own sense of what is right. And that's where we live today, in a world where the dynamism of that impulse is playing itself out with great intensity.